Mike, someone's written into us asking us a question with reference to weather files. And their concern fundamentally is around the cloud seeding that has been reported in Dubai. And because we have now discovered a way, what I mean by we is mankind has discovered a way to interfere or to affect weather patterns, how reliable the data set's going to be on the weather files when we are using these mathematical models to pull together the various calculations that we need to do to ascertain whether an area is hotter or cooler than another area, which then impacts on the building's performance and what's used.
Yeah, so the input files that we would use are based on gathering data and processing data and making predictions, like you say, based on mathematical models or certain kind of scenarios or situations that are projected in current. And so if we're able to manipulate that and adjust that, then that's another aspect that needs to be built into the calculations, to built into the weather file itself. So I'm not familiar with everything that goes into the current weather file assumptions and how they're created. But if this is a new part of our weather system, then it will just need to be included, and we can account for that by using a particular file that's generated.
Next question is, can the dynamic modeling be done by anybody else apart from a specialized consultant?
That's a good question. So the short answer is yes, and the long answer is no, even though it's
I
short
love that.
yes.
Yeah.
But so there are no certification schemes. So you don't have to take a course, demonstrate proficiency, sign up to an accreditation.
There's no license, is there?
There's no qualification license related to that. But like with all things, you need to be competent to provide guidance to people. It's really, really important. So what you tend to see is that if someone is competent in using IES software, for instance, dynamic modeling software, is that this will it's a different way of entering data into the system and using a particular package to produce the result. So like you say, anybody can do it if you're familiar with the parameters of the modeling, the requirements of the approved document. You can do that. If you can interpret the results, then yes. But more often than not, that's a bit of a jump. And so you have to have a proficiency within a particular type of dynamic modeling before you would seek to offer that out to customers. Mm-hmm. So hence the long answer is
so yes, you can do it, but you're not going to do it in a really short time frame because there's a whole load of information and skill set that you need to acquire, and that's going to take significant time to do.
Yeah, I could produce a calculation for you and give it to you, and you may never know that it's wrong. You know, there's a real requirement for people to offer a service that they're competent in. They're able to get paid for something which is going to enable the right. No one wants to give something to someone that isn't right.
Okay. Next question. Can you suggest some potential solutions for a ground floor bedroom to mitigate against overheating, and also that provides security at nighttime?
So part is to do with overheating, but it needs to keep people safe. And so being on the ground floor or being windows that are over, say, an extended part of the building on the ground floor, which enables people to climb up in easily access, needs to be mitigated against. It depends on what you want to use. So you could use grills, you could use shutters, you can use bars. Some of those seem quite heavy-handed and not really used to seeing those.
Yeah, it's not particularly aesthetically pleasing, but it's an option, right?
Yeah, so you've got those. Or the other way really is to look at some kind of louver that you might be able to use, or you keep the window shut. And in that particular location in the building, say for instance as a block of flats, you might then rely on mechanical ventilation, some kind of different ventilation system that's able to to provide a greater ventilation solution where you can't rely on the windows being open at certain times of the night.
This question here is maybe a little bit of a curveball. See what you think. Some people think that a room is really hot because they just are hot all the time. And some people think a room is really cold because they're just cold all the time. And so does it take into consideration the variances when you look at the software, the variances between people's preferred temperature? And the question here particularly references women versus men. So they're suggesting here that men are always hot and women are always cold. So does the software take that into consideration?
The software is just a mathematical thing that's, just does what it's told to do. But the song "Man's Not Hot, Never Hot," it doesn't apply to that situation. And I don't know what the temperatures are like on Venus and Mars, because men are from one and women from the other. But the software is designed it is a set point. And I have a father-in-law who's from Yorkshire, and the man's always got his windows and doors open, complaining that it's too hot. And so even within the male species, people suffer temperature in completely different ways. So that is a conundrum that I don't think will ever be able to be satisfied. I'll buy a house, you'll buy a house, you may think it's fantastic, I may think it's too hot and stuffy. So personal preference, you can't mitigate against personal preference, or the way our bodies function in slightly different ways. And so we just got to lump that one.
Sounds like a social problem as opposed to a building regulations problem.
I was just thinking, have loads of blankets in your house ready, but then I have no clue how to solve that one.
Can you help me understand the difference between TM52 and TM59?
So TM59 deals with overheating in residential buildings, and TM52 deals with overheating in non-residential buildings.
So can you give a brief explanation? Oh, you've done that already. Ignore that one. Is Revit software reliable for thermal and cooling load calculations?
My level of expertise doesn't extend maybe into those realms, but my understanding is that there isn't. At the moment, there's no plugins that work as efficiently and effectively at answering some of those questions as a specific dynamic software.
In part O, specifically on page 6, very specific.
What paragraph?
We'll come back to that one later. But in part O, it makes reference to buildings having cross ventilation. So if a room has a north and a west facing windows, which maximum glazing area percentage should be used?
So you'll always be required to use whatever is worse or more stringent. So you'll have to figure that out and then pick whichever is more stringent.
Do you believe that solar shading could be beneficial in residential scenarios?
Short answer is yes. It's one tool in the toolbox to prevent a building from overheating. We don't see that on our building designs at the moment, but yeah, 100%.
Does Part O apply for other domestic buildings, such as a new freestanding building for a swimming pool or a gym?
So again, TM52 would probably cover non-domestic freestanding structures. TM59 Part O would sprawl it across into things like care homes, where you've got a variety of different dwellings contained in a larger building. But you'd probably be looking at TM52 for that.
Does Part O apply to hospital buildings?
You'd have to read the fine print. There's a section in Part O that would talk about that. I'd say no, but it could do, because it requires people to stay in a particular place for a period of time. So that would definitely be one to take some guidance on. And I know there's a specific section in Part O where it talks about where Part O applies and where it doesn't apply. And so you'd need to refer to that section.
What advice would you offer to designers and practitioners who are relatively new to navigating Part O into their design process?
With all things, you'd need to read the regulations. Read the regulations, start early. so that you're not trying to overlay a requirement on a design that's already in motion or in construction. So you'd need to do that. And I partner with someone that you believe you can trust to help you with that. Part O does give you some guidance on window sizes potentially and so forth. But you want to design the building to be naturally ventilated where you can. So you're trying to ensure that window sizes are in the right place to allow more opening windows. You'll want to make sure that there's cross ventilation, and so some of the kind of key principles you want to be familiar with before you set to work. Really, that's what I would say.
And are there any emerging trends or advancements in the building materials or the construction techniques that can help address thermal comfort challenges while meeting the Part O requirements?
Trying to solve everyone's overheating cold situation in their dwellings is, like I say, you're never gonna solve that problem. But there's always innovative products that are dealing with thermal mass, innovative glazing products that are trying to allow and restrict light, solar gain, and so forth. So yeah, there's a variety of different products that are emerging onto the market. I wouldn't be able to list them all, but the materials we use, they'll adapt and adjust to the requirements that we've got to comply with.
Should be pleased to know that's the end of the quickfire questions.
Thank you.
I thought you'd be pleased. So the thing I want to talk about now is the current regulations that we're in at the moment. There's been a recent change, and that's meant the photographs need to be sent, and there's a whole load of different processes that we need to go through. Can you talk about what those changes are, what some of the issues are that people are bumping up against, and then if you can give us some nuggets of wisdom of how those things can be overcome, things to watch out for on the horizon, and any other little bit of fairy dust that you can sprinkle on the top.
So for years, the EPC process was the same. It involved the developer or architect, contractor signing a form to declare that the specification that had gone into the calculation had been built on site. And the performance gap is an issue between what's designed and what's built and how it operates. And so trying to solve that problem, the new regulations took a step towards closing that gap. And so there was an introduction, Appendix B in Part L 2021 details out the process that needs to be taken during construction for photographs to be taken. And those photographs should confirm that insulation, the right insulation, has been put in the right place, the right products have been used, so that what is designed is built, and so that should yield a closing of that performance gap. What it requires is anybody can take them, but they need to take them as the building's built, and then it's an additional piece of communication that needs to be circulated between the developer or the architect and the SAP assessor. Both people need to sign the document declaring that what has been built is representative of what has been designed, and that forms some of the evidence that goes to the building control officer, and it goes towards to the homeowner as well. And so the challenge that it poses is a new process, and so trying to pick up all of the changes with the new Part L is always tricky. And so assuming that people are taking pictures, that's really important. So at the end of the project, you've got a few other requirements that need to be included in the EPC process. So very, very early on, if you can give your SAP assessor an understanding of the dates that certain plots are going to be completing in a particular month, it's really, really useful. At the beginning of the project, there needs to be almost a design summary signed. So everyone's clear on any changes that have taken place during the build. Maybe there was a substitute product used in the external wall, or the heating system had to be tweaked, or the ventilation system was different, or the amount of PV has been adjusted. So we need to confirm that up front. Receiving the addresses up front, again, is really important. They can be input against the dwellings. That can happen at any time. As soon as the building is close to the end, lighting needs to be confirmed as well. That's one that maybe people aren't spotting. So sometimes the sales team can adjust the lighting design in a particular home. You know, the homeowner has some say over some of the finishes maybe. And so lighting now, the number of bulbs and the efficacy of the bulbs needs to be incorporated at the end. So that's an internal piece of communication that needs to take place, whether the sales team speak to the construction team as to what's been done, or whether someone goes in and counts bulbs and the different types of fittings that have been there and provides the technical information. That's really, really important. But you want to be able to clear as much of that up front so that once the air test is done and any MCS certificate relating to the air source heat pump or ground source heat pump or any kind of PV that you might have installed on a dwelling can be provided through, that can then release the BREL or BRWL document if it's in Wales, for it to be signed by the appropriate individual for the construction team and by the assessor, and then all documents can be received. The EPC can be completed, the SAP calculation can be completed, and it can be issued out. So it's more coordination. It needs to be done early, but it shouldn't elongate the process too much. But where there are things missing, that's going to be the kind of fly in the ointment, really. That's going to delay the issue of the EPC and the completion of dwellings. We've got experience of Barratt and Vistry, where they've got they use their own systems to collate the photographs. Where people haven't got that, I'd reach out to your energy assessor as soon as you can to see if they've got a document that you can populate by return, or they need to create one which links the photographs with the appropriate subheading in Appendix B, and doing that ahead of time, thinking through that process now, and coordinating on that is really important. Because if you don't do that, then, handover time is always a busy period, and so you want to clear some of the debris now and make sure everyone's okay on that. We've got a process which we've yet to give to people, which we need to do next couple of weeks, but we're starting to get people ask questions around how do I give the photos to you, and how does that work, and what's my time, is there a checklist? Is there a sequence? How can I make it more efficient? What can I do now to kind of prep for it? The other point that I think is useful to maybe dwell on is this calculation versus consultant. I really feel, you got that with part O. You asked a question, and how do I say this? And it slipped my mind, but where anyone can calculate it. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it gives it doesn't give the construction company potentially the most cost-effective solution, but it may work.
So I'd probably use that, because you used an analogy there, and I think that the analogy probably could be just adjusted slightly. Is anybody can get a car to move forward, but it doesn't mean to say that you can drive, or anyone can drive a car around the block, but that doesn't mean to say that you're a good chauffeur, because what you're looking for is an experience. And so I think that when you're looking at the difference between a consultant and someone that can input data, the consultant will give you an experience, and that experience will enable you to make a decision or to get something sorted so that you can do something else.
I guess if the point we're talking about is to go from calculation to consultancy, there's competency, and there's also interest. You really got wanted to do that.
Yeah, so it's your passion. You're not just doing it because...
We've bumped into people that just want to calculate, don't they? They just, it's just volume, it's mass. The business model is lots in, lots out, quick, gone. Whereas the other model is, I'm interested in helping you use your revenue to build better buildings. That's what I'm interested in doing.
So it's a different type of impact.
It's a different type of approach. And I think moving forward, it's important to assess, how are you engaged with people that give you the outcome you want? If you just want someone that gives you high volume without really an understanding, then make sure you stay with them. I think with the new regulations, trying to make sure your build costs stay within certain parameters is really important, because if you can conserve revenue, you can invest it in the right way. When you hemorrhage revenue, everything feels like costly. Your profit margins are down. You're not able to maximize and get and return what you want. So I think that's a point I'd really like to make, is that spend your money, but spend your money in the right place, on the right thing.
Be intentional with it.
Yeah, rather than it's supposed to cost me $6,000 and it has cost me $6,000, but you've not delivered the product that you could have done if actually you engaged with a consultant in a different way. You got them in early, you saw them as someone that could make your house type better, rather than, at the end, I need to get this done, so I need to send this to this person here.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I've been on round tables, panels, where the discussion has been, we need to act urgently for the sake of the climate. We need to do this with our buildings and that and the other. And just picking up on what you're saying here, and we've discussed this privately between the two of us, is that building to net zero has been something that has been possible for a long time. But the reason that it's not in the mass market is because people aren't willing to pay for it at the moment. That's the main blocker. But I think that the reason that people aren't willing to pay for it is because the route to it, or there is a preference of spending money in other areas because they're used to wasting money in those areas. And so by engaging and consulting, that enables those areas that are currently being wasted to be eradicated, and that money can then be transferred into other areas so that the buildings can be built at net zero.
Yeah, we know how to build to net zero. We're doing it. People are doing it, but doing it on scale, I think, is the next challenge. It's being able to take a product and produce that on scale in a way that industry is able to deliver and engage with, and consumers are happy to buy and to live within.
Yeah, because they see the value of it, right?
Yeah, and policy needs to point us in that direction. You know, we need to have requirements, policies, procedures, regulations which deliver the product that we're actually trying to go after.
Yeah, I think the policy has its place for sure, but I think that, you know, my overarching feeling, and we've spoken about this lots and lots, is that we need to have the ability and recognize the ability for us to do stuff because we want to do it. We need to have the freedom to choose. And when we're saying we want the government to do this and we want policy to do that, that points us closer to a communist type of living and environment, which the government then dictates what is right and what's not right in every sense. And yes, it does need to govern that in some senses, but in every sense it can't do. And people need to take responsibility for themselves and for their own actions, instead of giving their responsibility up to the government or to any other organization to say, well, you tell me what to do and I'll go and do it. I mean, what is that if it's not slavery? I mean, that's the definition of it, is where someone is deciding what you do, where you go, what you don't do, where you don't go, and you're beholden to them. That's the antithesis of it, if that's the right word to use. And I think that we can sleepwalk ourselves into crying out for, please enslave us, keep us all together, tell us what to do and we'll do it, and you can save us. It's like, no, let's work together and say, well, this is where we want to go, and let's actually just start doing it and stop waiting for the government to come along and save us. I mean, how many governments have, anyway, I'm probably rambling now, but
policy has a place to stretch and challenge industry, and industry has a place to move us forward. But we need to do that in tandem. We need to have something which stretches, which questions, which pushes, which delivers something, which achieves. If it's important for us to reduce carbon emissions, we have to be able to do it at scale, and we have to do it across the whole building stock. It can't just be a one-trick pony, which is new build only. It needs to go across the whole building stock, and it needs everyone to buy into that. And so if you're able to save some of the money, or if you're able to use your money in the right place, in the right way, then you're able to reinvest it to move forward in greater pace. And I think that's I find that really exciting, is to be able to help people to deliver something more than they thought potentially that they could do, whether that's a better building in central London, a high rise, or whether that's, an individual dwelling where someone's doesn't think that they can incorporate or achieve certain thresholds, and we're able to help them to achieve that. I find real achievement in doing that.
One of the things I look at is this concept that we've heard of a number of times with Henry Ford. He wasn't asking the question, let's just get quicker horses. How do we make the horse go quicker? He's like, well, let's just create the motor engine. And I appreciate that some people out there may think, well, that's the thing that got us here. If we were all round and round on a horse and cart, then the life would be better. But even if that's true, which I don't think it is, let's put that to the side and say that it's the adaptation and the complete thinking shift that enables the propulsion forward. And so the same has happened in the mobile phone market. Nokia, I remember being younger, having a Nokia phone, and I absolutely loved it. I remember getting a BlackBerry, and I absolutely loved that thing. And then the iPhone came along, and I was like, why have we got this iPhone? And then I remember using it, and I'm like, wow, you've just completely shifted my whole paradigm, my whole way of thinking with reference to how I interact with my phone. And so that's the thing that I'm trying to work on with the business, is how do we shift completely the thinking so that we actually get to the place that we want to go to, instead of asking for faster horses or for more Blackberries, or you understand what I mean?
Yeah, so I guess there's two ways of looking at that, comments I'd make. One is you've got AI, and our AI integrates with the process of calculating and compliance, acknowledgement, and so forth. And so we yet to see how that's going to come into play, but that's definitely going to feature in terms of how we move forward. I guess trying to get a horse to run faster with that analogy is, go back to early 2000s, and the EPC was something, it was very last minute. It was a certificate that needed to be produced, but there was no need to involve anybody in that apart from pushing the button to produce the EPC. And then over the last 20 years, the requirements of having somebody who is a specialist in the regulations has become further and further to the fore, now to the point where actually having that in-depth knowledge is difficult to have if you're in another specialist field. And so I think one of the things which is really, really important with the kind of evolution of the regulations again is almost to incorporate these energy consultants into the design process, so that at the beginning we're able to ask the right questions to enable the building costs to be measured, to enable the building to be thermally efficient, to comply with Part O, Part L, to meet Part K, to have these discussions early on with architects, to talk about the role of psi values. How can we mitigate that? How can we accurately account for a more holistic building heat loss? How is there a way to record, is there appetite to record the actual fabric energy efficiency in a building and then feed that back into evolving designs? You know, so there is an evolution that we can get with now, and we can change how we move forward, whilst I'm conscious that, you know, coming is probably a radical change around how technology plays a more prominent role in coordinating some of the functions that we do at the moment ourselves.
Well, Mike, normally what I do with guests that come on the podcast is I get them to come to the demolition zone with me, build up something which is a representation of a myth, and then talk about it and knock it down. You up for doing that?
Sure.
Let's do it. Good. Okay, we're back in the demolition zone. Mike, what is this monstrosity that you have built?
I wanted to build the biggest tower that you've had on the podcast. It is out of frame.
It really is out of frame.
It is out of frame.
I reckon that's getting on for 3 foot high, to be honest.
Like Jenga.
2.5 foot.
That's what it is.
It's a big one.
But I got an idea about what. So on it, you've got a sheep.
Yep.
We shouldn't follow the crowd.
Yep.
We shouldn't be a sheep. There's a stop sign on there.
Yep.
We need to stop this.
Yep.
So it's kind of, you know, a few little different blocks on there as well, I think.
And for those people that are listening, the structure is extremely tall. I think it's like reminds me of the Burj Khalifa. It's that tall.
Oh wow! If I could design something like that, then that'd be fantastic.
So what does it represent?
So I think in the industry sometimes, and in business, we can get quite worried about other people, competitors, other organizations. And I think if we're to move forward, you know, we need to carve our own part of the field out, be clear about what it is that we do, and confident in what we do. And it needs to be okay just to collaborate together. I think over the years, it feels it's a them and us, and if we're to really make a big difference, we need to work together and to be open to collaborating and sharing how we can solve this problem of carbon reduction or net zero. You know, we need to work together rather than see other organizations that provide the same service as a competition or someone to be avoided or to protect ourselves from.
And by doing this will help us to achieve net zero quicker, is that what you're saying?
It will enable us to come together and collaborate more. You know, the new regulations will require more organizations, more design team members to work together earlier and closer. And as there's wider industry collaboration to solve a big problem, we're going to need to work together in the same place to achieve the same result. And so that will enable us to benefit from each other's learning experience and find better solutions.
So the sheep is stop following the crowd. Is that what the sheep is representative of?
You know,
on the tower?
be willing to be different. You know, be willing to try something new. Be willing to approach other people in the industry in a different way. You know, there's no need to be upset by them, or, you know, just to take a different approach. Really.
Good. Well, Mike, I think now all you can do is just destroy the myth.
Right then, here we go. Going to kick it out.
With a slight swipe of the right foot, you
and the chair always going over
down, and you nearly came out from underneath you. That would have been a different type of
when
program.
you try something different, sometimes you just got to be nimble, get your balance right afterwards. It can throw you off. Do you know what I mean? That's what it is.
I love that, Mike. I love that. So we've discussed quite a lot today. I think there's lots of elements of our conversation that are pointing towards the future, predominantly within the residential space. But I'm wondering if you've got any thoughts on anything else relating to not just the topic that you discussed here about better collaboration, but anything else kind of connected to the industry as a whole picture, how we as an organization interact with architects, with mechanical and electrical organizations, with the end client. I wonder if you've got any thoughts or any views on that to share.
I think the only we've made lots of points today, so try not to kind of repeat what's been said, but the need to really work together and be vulnerable, I think is really important. This balance between feeling personally, professionally competent, but at the same time, when we look in the industry, sometimes we can compare ourselves with others, and we can see other individuals, and we do that in life, don't we? We measure our success, our performance, our self-esteem based off how we imagine others to live their life by the way that we view them. And I think professionally, we need to be mindful of that as well. It's okay to be competent, but also to still be learning and to see somebody else's expertise as an opportunity for us to learn, rather than it be a message to ourselves that actually we're not enough, or that we're not as competent as we thought we could be. I think you can have confidence and vulnerability. You can have competence and learning all together, and it's only our own thought process that stops us learning anything. So if you don't know it right now, then be honest enough to say, I don't know that, and I'm going to learn about it. And the longer you spend time talking to people or reading things about it, you'll be proficient in it before no time.
Thanks, Mike. I think this is one of the reasons why it was so great to get you on here to run this more of a kind of a CPD session, as opposed to kind of the stereotypical. It wasn't stereotypical. That's why I think it's so good to have you on here to run this CPD session instead of the more regular podcast that I've done. So thanks for dropping your wisdom. Thanks for doing the great stuff that you do for the company and the way that you work with members of the team and the customers. It's been great having you here, building your Burj Khalifa tower, kicking it down with your right foot. Thanks very much, Mike.
Props.
I'd like you to do me a favor, and I don't mean here just to ask you to subscribe and to follow, but what I'd really like you to do is to share this podcast with as many people as you think would benefit from it. I would love to maintain the quality of people that are joining me on this podcast, and so in order for me to do that, I really need your help. It could be somebody that's looking to get into an industry, but they're not quite sure what industry they want to get into. Maybe it's a teenager that is just finishing their GCSEs or starting A-levels. Maybe it's somebody that's doing an English degree at university but is not quite sure what they want to do with that degree. So I invite you just to share this podcast with as many people that you know, so that we can grow this community, so that we can maintain the quality, engaging conversations that we're having together. Thank you for your help.